Welcome back to Games of the Future, a video series where I talk a bit about some upcoming games I'm excited for. In today's episode we are going to talk about the game releasing later this month by Ubisoft, For Honor. For Honor was announced at E3 2015, where already some gameplay footage was shown to support the reveal trailer. I remember liking the game visually with its beautifully detailed fantasy setting with knights, Viking and samurai. From the first footage I saw from the gameplay looked a bit Dynasty Warriors-ish, since there were a massive amount of troops you could smack around in waves. However, when I got to actually play the game, it turned out to be something rather different. My special thanks goes for Trusty Skeleton. Because of him I got the chance to participate in the closed beta during the last day, and got to spend 5 or so hours with the game. Most of my time of that 5 hours I had to spend just by trying to get used to the combat system, since this was my first time playing the game. To be honest, I was able to basically just scratch the surface within my short time with the game, and right as I was starting to get the hang of things, the beta unfortunately ended. But I can already tell you that they have crafted quite interesting combat system here. When you encounter an opponent on the battlefield, you usually want to use the target lock to lock onto them in order to keep the camera fixed to your opponent while you challenge them to combat. You have 3 different stances, left, right and high, which can be switched around with your analog stick, assuming you're using a controller of course. These different stances determine which angle you're going to attack your opponent from, but also the angle you block your opponent's attacks. Upcoming attacks have red visual cue, which gives you the time to react and adjust your stance accordingly to block them, and also a different indicator when the upcoming attack is going to be unblockable. There are both light and heavy attacks, and all different classes in the game have different attack chains they can perform by combining these in different order. On top of this, all the classes, of which there were 9 available in the beta, 3 for each faction, had their own special abilities. For example, Nobushi and Peacekeeper could inflict bleed that has health training effect, while Raider on the other hand could run into opponents, pick them up and toss them around. In this video you're mainly going to see me using the Warden class, since I figured that class seemed like one of the best to learn the basics of the game with. On top of your attacks and special attacks you can also use the Guard Break, which is unblockable, and if landed successfully leaves your opponent open for follow-up attacks. You can also chain your Guard Break to throw, where you grab the opponent and can push them to your chosen direction. This is actually a really useful option to keep in mind, since the maps of For Honor are filled with environmental dangers like fires and pitfalls that can easily make you win or lose around instantly. So keeping an eye on your surroundings is an important element of combat in For Honor as well. You can also sidestep and roll in combat, but I didn't utilize this as much as I probably should have, and I think it is mainly meant to be used to avoid unblockable attacks. Actually, if there's something that I personally felt was lacking about For Honor's combat system, was the lack of movement. This is a personal thing of mine, but I like when games include movement as an element of combat, and For Honor has very little movement involved. That said, I must say that the combat system is quite something. I had a lot of fun with it, learning how to counter different classes and learning their attacks. It felt so damn satisfying to first time flawlessly block your opponent's attempts to open you up with different attacks and retaliate with your own. The combat can look a bit sluggish when you're watching someone else play, but it doesn't feel that way when you're actually playing yourself. The game is very highly centered around PvP, and I can already picture in my mind that high level combat in this game can lead to some absolute nail-biter matches. In the end, I wouldn't call the combat system too complex really, and there's not a lot you need to learn execution-wise. But the depth of it comes from selecting the right option and being ready to react accordingly based on whether your opponent is able to counter this option or not. So in a sense, For Honor is almost kind of a pseudo-fighting game, like what Dark Souls PvP formed to be with the dueling community of that game, but the difference being that For Honor is fundamentally designed around PvP. I spent most of my time in best of 5 1v1 mode, But there were other modes like 2v2 and that so-called Dynasty Warriors mode I mentioned earlier, where two teams are fighting against each other with hordes of cannon fodder enemies and capturing areas for your team as an element as well. There's also a bunch of customization options available in the game. By earning in-game money you get from doing matches, you can modify your colors, looks and weaponry. This is really nice because the game actually looks pretty damn great. All the character models are highly detailed and the areas where you battle to death are all really beautiful, varying from medieval castles to oriental forests. Character animations are really fine and especially the gory round-ender executions look brutal as hell. The weapons and armor you can find and upgrade grant you different bonuses, but also come with negative effects to balance them out. The overall balance between the classes available in the beta was not perfect, and the comeback mechanic called the Revenge, of which I'm not going to talk for now, seemed like it could be abused pretty easily. But I don't think I want to touch on these things yet because, for one, I lack the necessary experience to talk about that in depth yet, since I only spent 5 hours with the game, so the things that I think are unbalanced might have counters in the game that I haven't just discovered yet, and what I played was a beta after all. So changes are still being made to the final build of the game, especially in terms of balance I believe. The game also ran very well for me on my single GTX 980 Ti, with all the graphical settings cranked as high as possible, and apart from a couple of rather hilarious minor glitches, I had no technical issues with it. Although load times are currently pretty damn long, and you're going to be waiting a long time between the matches and rounds before you get to fight. My time with For Honor beta might have been brief, but there's still one open beta coming before the game releases later this month. I'm very excited to get more comfortable with this new kind of fresh combat system, and I'm very interested to see what kind of PvP community the game forms after the release. Thank you so much for watching, and take care.
Seems like that for a